If you want to go ahead, I believe we have plenty of folks to get us started, and know we're going to be pushing our timeline as it is, and I know everybody is working through this lunch, so it's all yours to start off when you're ready, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Let me say good morning to everybody. I hope I'm heard. Everybody can hear me, but good morning, and thank you all for being a part of this Star City Strong Recovery Fund Task Force. This is a major undertaking that we want to, and let me say, all of you were vetted hard. We looked at everything and made sure you were the right person to be here. So we appreciate your willingness to serve. And I thought that would bring a smile out on somebody when we said we vetted everybody and did a background check and all those kinds of things. So you're in the right place. But we're delighted to have you here, and we've got a meeting scheduled here for a couple of hours. And for the most part, it's going to be an introductory meeting as we prepare to do what we can do to recover from this onset of this virus as affected our city and many other cities. So we think we got some of the best minds in our community to be with us. And so again, thank you. I will be serving as co-chair along with my colleague, Vice Mayor Joe Cobbs. And we'll talk a little bit more about our role as we get into the bylaws. Also, I'm always pleased to have our city manager with us. And I think Dan Callahan or did Dan leave? I think Dan.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, I'm always appreciative to have my attorney around. So I want to make sure I feel better when Dan is here. But thank you all for coming, and we have a pretty good agenda here today, but it's more or less I call an introductory. So at this time, I want to ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves and tell us about the group, a specific group or organization that you identify with as we go forward. And so we do have a quorum here. So
It looks like you're on.
If it works, Mayor, what I'll do is just for the sake of kind of rather than everybody just jumping in all at one time, I'm gonna call folks off by the order that I see them in the screen. So when I call your name, if you would unmute yourself, just introduce yourself. And again, if you are on representing an organization, if you would identify that organization or that entity. And so we're going to start with Andrea Mclamb. You're first on my screen. So
first in your heart too, right?
That's right.
I'm Andrea Mclamb. I've worked in public and private school for the last 30 years. I'm currently working at Hurt Park Elementary School. I wish I could say I were teaching at Hurt Park Elementary School, but not so much recently, just more working. I've been in the community recently, which I hadn't done before so much, but now after COVID, I've been working with the families in the community, which for me personally opened my eyes to some things. And for me, I am hoping to represent families in our community from an educational standpoint.
Looks like your audio is on.
Is mine on?
Yep, you're on. Yep, you're good.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So, you know, my personal goal is to take a more active role in our community.
Very good.
As an educator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on my screen is Ellen Stick.
Good morning. I am Ellen Stick. I was also in public education for the past 30 years, most recently Roanoke City Public Schools as the social studies supervisor. Now I am the director of education at the Virginia Museum of Transportation, and also very interested in helping communities members get access to resources that they need, working both with some folks who live in Lansdowne and some of our Lincoln Terrace area, as well as Family Promise. I've worked with some of the homeless folks in the area as well. So I'm looking forward to this opportunity.
Thank you, Ellen. And you're next on my screen.
Who was that, Bob?
That was Pete Eshelman.
Hear you.
Okay.
My name is Pete Eshelman. I'm with the Roanoke Regional Partnership, the Economic Development Organization, and also Roanoke Outside Foundation. So I'm here kind of representing the outdoor recreation sector.
Thank you, Pete. And Brenda Hale, you are next.
Good morning, everyone. Brenda Hale, President of the Roanoke Branch NAACP.
Thank you, Brenda. And Rachel Hopkins, you are next.
Good morning, I'm Rachel Hopkins. I'm the Executive Director at the Science Museum of Western Virginia, and one of my goals is to represent not only the education system, Roanoke City Public Schools, but parents and guardians of students, because we believe more than ever we will be moving forward and educating our children in a collaborative manner that are going to be introduced. And so being a resource for both the school system and somehow trying to do that in a way that we are communicating and with parents and their needs, they move forward and are able to financially support their households while educating their children.
Thank you, Rachel. And Debbie Brown, you are next.
Hi, I'm the Director of Program and Outreach Ministries for Green Memorial United Methodist Church. My main focus is with the homeless. I do work with the Homeless Assistance Program with the Roanoke City Schools. Also the coordinator for the Congregations in Action, trying to get churches and other agencies to be involved in the schools to help out any way they can. That's it.
Thank you, Debbie. And Joyce Wall.
Good morning. I'm Joyce Wall, President of the Roanoke Regional Chamber, and glad to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carol, you are next.
Hi, I'm Carol Rowlett. I do research and assessment for Virginia Western Community College. I'm also a Greenway ambassador and very active with a serial volunteer with Roanoke City Park and Rec.
Thank you, Carol. And Landon, you're next.
Landon Howard, President of Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge, representing the hospitality and tourism industry and our 8,000 employees. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this task force and look forward to the work.
Thank you, Landon. And Bethany, you're next.
My name is Bethany Lackey, and I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to be a part of this task force. It's a lot of incredible people here. I'm the director of Roanoke Refugee Partnership, and I'm also a licensed professional counselor, and I started my own private practice that specializes in vulnerable populations.
Thank you. And Gerald, you are next.
Good morning. I'm Jarrell Rhodes. I am a guidance coordinator for Roanoke City Public Schools. I've worked with Roanoke City for 22 years. I'm also the founder and of Rebounding Roanoke, which is an organization that I created for the youth of the greater Roanoke Valley.
Jarrell, sorry, I mispronounced your first name. I'll get it right from now on. So.
That's okay. I'm used to that.
Thank you. Abby.
No problem.
Hi, everybody. I'm Abby Hamilton with United Way of Roanoke Valley. Been here in the community working with nonprofits, representing them in this task force for the last 18 years. And since COVID affected our community back in March, we have been convening a lot of our nonprofit and community partners weekly to address some of the most important issues that families are facing right now. So we've been coordinating a lot of those efforts, and also we were in the middle of distributing and raising money for the COVID response fund, which we've done and awarded to about 18 agencies already. So I'm hoping that my role here at the task force provides a good complement to the work that the city is trying to do, and always an honor to kind of add value to the conversation.
Thank you, Abby. Dr. Downey, you're next.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Elda Stanko Downey, and it's great to see so many familiar, friendly faces, even if we're so far away in our respective little holes. I'm a local business owner. I'm also faculty at the Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine and active in the community, in particular in the Latinx community, which is one of the groups that is being highly affected by COVID-19. So looking forward to working with everyone and bringing some solutions to some of the more affected communities in our area.
Thank you. And Brian Wells.
Good morning. Great day here at the Hotel Roanoke and Conference Center. It's great to be part of this task force. We really respect the fact that our success really helps impact a lot of people in the community. And we're working really hard to build business back up and look at this task force as an opportunity to really engage with people in the community we don't normally get to.
Thank you, Brian. And Tommy, you're next.
Morning, everyone. I'm Tommy Page, New Focus Group. We have a minority-owned business operating out of Gainesboro. We've also been working very strong to provide solutions for small businesses, nonprofits, independent artists, and other entrepreneurs. Just working heavily in the community to be able to impact as best we can. So thanks for being invited to the conversation.
Thank you, Tommy. And James Smith, you're next.
Hello, I'm James Smith. I'm a regional manager for Gen Edge. We are a manufacturing extension partnership for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And Roanoke is my region. I look out for manufacturers. We help manufacturers with innovation, competitiveness. We help them with growth. And so looking forward to being part of this task force. Thanks.
Thank you, James. And Karen, you're next.
I'm Karen Pillis, and I am the Director of Mental Health Services at Family Service of Roanoke Valley and a lifelong Roanoker. And I'm really looking forward to representing those with mental health needs, as well as Roanoke citizens as a whole and all the quadrants on this task force.
Thank you, Karen. And Pam Smith, you're next. Pam, can you hear us, Pam? Oh,
yeah, sorry. I'm Pamela Smith. I'm the Assistant Director with Youth Advocate Programs. We work with youth and families that are system involved to try to keep them in the community. So it's going to be really great for us to have a presence on the task force and see how we can help our kids in the community.
Thank you. And Troy Cook.
Good morning. I'm Troy Cook, owner and founder of Renaissance Contract Lighting and Furnishings. We are a manufacturer here in the Valley, employ roughly 50 people and provide for them and their families. Certainly eager to see what can be achieved with this task force so that we can get the community back on its feet and overcome the COVID virus.
Troy. And Kat, you're next.
Morning, everyone. I'm Kat Pascal. I'm the co-founder of Farm Burguesa Restaurants in Benton and Roanoke. I also own a commercial cleaning business, Spotless America, and I'm heavily and highly interested in the Latino Hispanic community.
Thank you, Kat. And Shalene, you're next.
Hey. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shalene Powell. I'm the Executive Director for the Roanoke Cultural Endowment. I'm also a violinist with the Roanoke Symphony, a mother of 2 young kids here in the city, and my husband owns a couple of restaurants. So I'm here specifically just to really bring some my focus will be on the arts and culture sector primarily, as that is an important part of who we are as a city. So thanks, it's really good. I'm in great company.
Thank you, Shalene. And Tony.
Good morning, everyone. Tony Segovia with Intercept Health. We are a mental health, psychiatric, and substance abuse provider. We have been providing services throughout the entire pandemic. So interested to lend a voice and hear what everybody has to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And I know, Tamia, you are joining us, but you didn't have a camera working. So if you're able to introduce yourself.
Good morning. This is Tamia Franco. I must not be prepared for this task force because I thought I was supposed to represent Roanoke City. I didn't realize I was supposed to be representing my company. Global Metal Finishing, I recognize a lot of people and am so honored to be in a group of individuals like you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I think there are some folks joining on the phone also. So if you're on the phone, since I don't know who you are, if somebody can jump in and introduce yourself. Anyone on the phone?
Good morning. This is Cheryl Mosley. I'm not on the phone, but I do have a lot that's happening at the Community Solutions Center right now. So I do have my video locked. I am the director of the Community Solutions Center on Melrose Avenue with Beating Southwest Virginia. And I just look forward to being a part of this task force.
Thank you, Cheryl. Are there others that are joining us on the phone or don't have their camera activated?
Yes, this is Cynthia Lawrence. And I am representing Carillion, actually the Virginia Tech Carillion Partnership. I work on behalf of Carillion on several projects, one of which is health sciences education in the region, trying to raise the rigor in that arena to serve our economy. I work with them also on addiction education and how that affects our caregivers as well as our legal system. And then I also work on housing and food insecurity. I'm thrilled to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. And are there others that are, am I missing?
Chris Bryant. I'm just a citizen of Roanoke. I have lived in Roanoke for over 40 years, and I've always been interested in helping Roanoke become a great city, and I'm hoping to help get it back on its feet.
Very good, thank you. And Jan, I think you're on as well.
Yes, I'm Jan Keister. I am representing the nonprofit sector. I work with the Legal Aid Society of Roanoke Valley, which is state opened. I'm also working with KidSoar, which is usually an after-school program, but is now an emergency food bank. And I am on the board of Old Southwest Inc., a neighborhood organization.
Thank you, Jan. And is there anyone else that I'm missing? All right, looks like we've got everyone. I do know there are a couple of other members who had previously contacted me, letting me know that they were unable to attend this meeting, but certainly will be joining us in future meetings. And Mayor, we most certainly have a quorum, and so welcome all. And I will guess I'll introduce myself for those of you that may not know me. So I'm Bob, and I'm the city manager here as well. And I will ask, I know the mayor has introduced himself, and if Vice Mayor Cobb would also introduce himself, then Mayor, we can move to the next item after that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Cobb. I'm the Vice Mayor for the city and a member of City Council. I also serve as a chaplain for Hermitage Roanoke, a senior living community, and do community outreach coordination for Highland Park School. I'm really glad you all are here.
Thank you, Joe. Mayor, if you want to move to item number 2 on the agenda.
All right, thank you. And let me again say welcome to everyone here. We're going right down the list. And item number 2 is an overview of purpose and function of the task force. And one major function that you all have is to submit recommendations to council for use of the Star City Strong Recovery Fund to support the recovery and the resilience of the community. So that's an important role. So I want to ask Bob if he will come and give us a little more background on the purpose and the function of this task force.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. And I'll start just by apologizing to you all, because in this first meeting, you're going to hear a whole lot more of me than you really want to, since this is really the organizational meeting. It's going to be a lot of us telling you information. The subsequent 3 meetings after this will be the complete opposite. It will be you all talking with us about information. So I apologize for that up front as we go forward. As the mayor indicated, the purpose is really of this task force is to help the council determine the best way to use the resources that have been identified to support the community's recovery from COVID-related impacts, and to better equip itself to be resilient in the face of similar shocks should they occur in the future. Of particular note associated with that resiliency is equity, and you're going to hear us talk about that as we go through this along. As you all know, prior to COVID-19, the city, along with many of our other partners, many of you are representing those partners, were well aware of and addressing inequities that exist within our community. Those were things like generational poverty, access to health care, quality employment opportunities, disparity in health outcomes, a whole host of other things, again, that many of you are involved in. And COVID-19, among many other things, certainly laid bare those vulnerabilities, those inequities that exist within the community. And then more recently, the demonstrations that have occurred all across the nation have really amplified that even more. And so that has caused us, really in this case, to take what was otherwise simply a way in which we allocate funds and say, can we allocate those funds in a way that not only helps us to recover, but also furthers our efforts as a community at addressing the inequities that exist within the community. And so as we work on formulating recommendations being made to council, we should keep that in the back of our minds, that does this also help further addressing equity within that particular area as we move forward. The task force, and there's a reason for this craziness that I'm about to explain, and I'll explain it a little bit later, but the task force will meet 3 more times to formulate its recommendations. This is a very fast-paced process, and there's a reason for that, and that's because the significant pot of money, if you will, that we have has a timeline attached to it, which is all of the money has to be spent by the end of the calendar year. And so that's causing us to need to move very rapidly in getting recommendations to council. The mayor and vice mayor, as mentioned, are co-chairing the task force, and I'm serving along with the city clerk's office, city attorney's office as staff support. And there's a lot of other folks that we can bring into this conversation to assist in that as well. Each of you have been selected by the mayor, the vice mayor, and the council. As you've already heard, for your knowledge of the community, your specific perspective, or previous interest in the betterment of the community. Some of you have been selected by me. I had a number of appointments to this as well, specifically for your leadership roles within a community institution or organization. In addition, there are 7 general citizen appointments that were appointed for the task force, and everyone falls within a group of different sectors that are represented in our community. And I'm not going to go through all of those, but I'll list a few of them. They include healthcare, hospitality, manufacturing, arts and culture, the NAACP, youth. You've heard some of those in here, and so we've tried to bring that kind of diversity to it. The council has done this intentionally, and really to make it as diverse as possible to ensure that as many lived experiences and perspectives as possible are made a part of formulating these responses and recommendations to the council. I will be providing to you all via separate email a full list of the membership so that you know, again, who everybody is that's on the group as well. That'll also be posted to the city's website along with other information that you either already have received or you will additionally receive with it as well. The work of the task force fits within an overall framework that the city has established to guide its recovery. This has been known as the Star City Strong initiative, and it's built upon a set of principles that we've used both in our response to COVID and that we will use going on in the recovery. And that orients around compassion, respect and dignity, collaborative partnerships, trustworthiness, and again, equity, as I mentioned. Obviously, the city continues to respond to the virus and its impacts with this process, and the work of the task force is us beginning to turn our attention to the recovery in addition to that response. But we are still very much in a response mode as well. As of this morning, there were a total of 375 cases that have occurred in our community. There are 14 individuals currently hospitalized, and unfortunately there have been 10 deaths in our community as a result of COVID. So we still continue the response part even as we move into this recovery phase. The economic and social impacts have also been pretty staggering in the community as well. More than 11,000 Roanokers are currently unemployed. More than $12 million of revenue has not been realized by the city, which strains our ability to continue to provide essential services. Business activities in certain economic sectors have declined to unprecedented levels. You know, Brian Wells can certainly attest to this. There was a moment probably less than a month ago where I think Brian had 3 guests in his 330-room hotel. And that just gives you a sense of the magnitude of what economically has been going on. And anybody, I know a number of you run restaurants, and I don't even need to say anything about the experience that you all have had about that impact. But also, arts and cultures organizations have been unable to host guests and performances. You know, they've seen those revenues cease. Another sad note is that suicides and overdose rates have continued to climb in our community as we've gone through this process. More people have had to access food assistance, and children are without easy access to school, many summer activities, and so on. So it's evident that the impact to our community has been substantial. And our objective now is to use these funds and to use your knowledge to regain the momentum and strength that we had locally before COVID arrived, and how we do so to become more resilient and more equitable in that response as we move forward. That's our charge, and that's what we need your help in doing as we move forward. We have been, as I had alluded to previously, even in the response phase, all of you and us have actually been doing some of the things that we'll be talking about. We have provided funding for emergency local business assistance through TAP and our Economic Development Authority, as well as through the Workforce Development Board. We have provided assistance for housing homeless individuals who have been or may be exposed to COVID. There's been a deferral of the due date to property taxes that were due. We provided technical support to businesses. You know, Abby's talked about some of the work that United Way has done and so on. So all of those activities obviously have been going on all in the interim. So that is my first shot at sort of conveying to you the reason for this task force and the way it has been composed and sort of what its charge is. And I'll come back to that again in a few moments as we get further into the discussion. But that's that quick overview. Are there any questions about that kind of broad, quick sort of overview of the purpose of the task force, knowing that in a few minutes I'll get more into the actual function of the task force? Are there any questions? Seeing none, then Mayor, I will ask if you will turn to item number 3, which is the adoption of the bylaws.
Thank you, Bob. And that is our next item, is the adoption of the bylaws. And many of you may, I'm assuming, may have gotten this with your package or may have gotten this in the mail. Is that accurate?
Yeah, everyone should have received this in the email. Yep, got copies of it right there, so thank you.
All right, and you can see it as outlined. We're talking about for the most part, the members, officers, and duties of everyone here. Our regular meeting dates, which is important. Please note that, because this, as Bob mentioned, we're going to be moving quickly through this. Public hearing, which there's some rules as it relates to the public being listening and following us as the work that we're going to be doing. Attendance is very important, and having a quorum, we had to have 20 today. I'm pleased to see that we did get that and more, so that's a good sign. And then Bob, and I'll ask Bob to talk about, as he has alluded to, the general responsibilities of the task force. So Bob, could you elaborate a little bit more on the bylaws? And we need to adopt them. So after further discussion, I'm going to call for a motion on the bylaws. Hopefully I'll get a motion and a second and we can adopt the bylaws. But I'd like for you to take a look, discuss, and see.
Well, while we wait for the mayor to unfreeze, I will say that there's really not much more to add to. We've tried to keep the bylaws as basic as we can and still conform with bureaucratic responsibilities.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
You back there, Mayor? Okay.
If no questions, could I get a motion,
Oh, hold on.
please, to adopt the bylaws?
I second.
Second.
The only other thing, Mayor, that I'll add is we've not
Will
intentionally,
approve the bylaws. Anyone?
bylaws, we've not intentionally put the dates for the meetings yet. We'll talk about those at the very end.
All right, anybody here, we just need.
Mayor, you're cutting it, you're cutting in and out.
Need a motion to adopt the bylaws.
Yeah, we've got, so Landon made the motion and Brenda Hale seconded the motion. So at this point,
So, can anybody hear me? Can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you now, but you've been cutting out. Can you hear us okay?
Oh, can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yeah, can you hear us?
Hello?
Hello, Mayor.
All right, well, while we figure out the mayor here, Joe, would you mind calling for the vote on that item then?
Yes, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the bylaws as presented. All those
I
in favor?
can't hear you. Hopefully somebody can hear me.
Yeah, Mayor, since you're frozen, I'm just moving ahead with the motion. All those in favor, either say aye or signal in your reactions, a hand clap or a thumbs up.
Aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
Hello, can you hear me?
All right, the motion's passed, Bob and Mayor.
Thank you. And we'll try to get the mayor back on here so that he can hear us and stuff. So Joe, if you wouldn't mind then on item, if you wouldn't mind introducing.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, Mayor, we can hear you, but I don't think you can hear us.
Hello?
Can you hear us okay, Mayor?
Does he have his phone muted? Did he hit a wrong button?
It's not
Has
showing,
his eye? Yeah.
not showing that it's muted.
He just froze.
Tiffany, can you try and call him and find out?
Yeah, we'll do that.
All right. Well, let's move ahead to item number 4, which is the overview of funding sources and parameters. And Bob, one question that came up in the chat box, and you may want to address this at some point, is are we to when are we to allocate the funds by? Is that the next by the end of this fiscal, the end of this calendar year, or
Hello?
elaborate on that?
Yeah, and it's
Hello, can you hear me?
it's a little bit of both. And that's this part I'll explain through that. So let me jump into that and I'll get to that point. So yeah, so as far as the funding piece, let me jump in and say that when this was originated, the city council had pledged at least $1 million to go toward this effort. I think as I go through this section, you'll see that actually there's significantly more money possible to go toward this effort, which is a good thing. So I'll go through and say, there's kind of about four different buckets, if you will, of money that we have access to for this effort. The largest source of funding is the city's allocation of the CARES Act funding. So most of you probably remember that Congress approved the CARES Act. That's actually what delivered the individual stimulus. That's what set up the payroll preservation programs and a whole host of other things. A part of that was a significant amount of money that was sent to the to states and or to select large, very large cities. In Virginia, there was only one community that actually received those funds directly. Everyone else received it to the state. The state then turned around and provided funding to the localities. So on June 1st, we received roughly $8.6 million to go toward that effort. And we are retaining about a third of those dollars for the needs that we have within the city structure. So what that is we have to obviously, we're upfitting our buildings in order to accommodate the public back in, and there's a cost associated with that. We have other expenses like actually getting for our teleworkers, those kinds of things. And also that may serve as kind of a phase 2 for this effort, that if there's funding left from that, we could roll back into this effort. So we will have about 2/3 of those dollars, which is about $5.6 million, available to this effort that we've asked you all to help us with as we go through. As I noted earlier, and as Vice Mayor Cobb just mentioned, these are by far, the good news is there's 5.6 million. The challenging news is these are by far the most restricted dollars. Congress was extraordinarily specific in saying that these funds cannot be used by the localities to replace any of that $12 million that I just mentioned that we no longer have. So that's automatically off the table. And it has to be expenditures that are directly related to COVID. So the easiest one, for example, is I'm a business and I need to go buy a bunch of PPE so that I can actually open up my business. That would obviously be eligible. There's not a lot of other guidance as to what directly eligible means. I sent to you all 2 different documents that have been created recently by folks, one being VML and the other one out of, I think it was actually the Department of Treasury or someone, which attempts to answer some of those. But I can tell you the VML one comes out about every 2 weeks with a new list of questions that communities are asking. So it's a bit of a challenge. And of course, the risk of getting it wrong is, 1, you send money back that you don't want to send back to Congress. And 2, you spend it wrong, and now you're on the hook as a city. We're on the hook for reimbursing them those dollars. So, we continue to try to figure out how we actually manage that piece as we go forward. But that's one bucket of money, is that CARES Act funding. And it does have to be spent by the end of the calendar year. So that's,
hey, Dan, the number I'm calling gives me a business signal.
Pardon me?
Somebody's talking to the mayor now. So it has to be spent by the end of the calendar year. One of the things the localities asked the Department of Treasury was, could it be just encumbered? In other words, we got a bill for it. No, they said it has to be spent the way that the act was written. So that's one source of funding. The second source of funding is our Community Development Block Grant Program, or the CDBG money. In that same act, Congress provided us an additional $1 million of CDBG money. Those CDBG dollars, that's essentially double what we would normally get for CDBG funding. That funding, I'll explain, some of you already know this, but usually when that funding comes to us, there is a citizen-appointed board that actually reviews applications coming in from various nonprofits and others, and then they make recommendations, and then those dollars get forwarded to those organizations, so those groups, after the council approves it. So when that $1 million came in, it came in also with Congress indicating they want that money spent, or HUD really, they want that money spent as quickly as it can be. And so that same citizens group met
To the Germantown one,
and signed
301.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, and then after you get that, you should get
So they went ahead and assigned a piece of that, about $600,000 of that $1 million has already been awarded to our local community. Basically, folks are already getting those dollars. That leaves in there about $450,000, which was identified for small business grants. And so in that case, what this group will help us do is determine where is that best purpose. So I'll give you an example that in some communities, they've said, those small business grants really need to be focused toward our folks that are in hospitality and entertainment. And that's where they spent their energy. They said, we're not going to move it over. Others have said, we need it in areas which employ predominantly low-income individuals. So those would be examples, and it doesn't have to be an either or, it can be a blend. So that $450,000 would actually be dollars that we would, that's already allocated for a purpose. We just need to provide refinement to that purpose. Those do not have the same timeliness requirement. They have a timeliness requirement, but it's not by the end of the calendar year. So that's the second bucket of money. The third bucket of money is called ESG funding, which is the emergency shelter grant funding, which also comes from HUD to us annually. And they've actually allocated now 2 different fundings to us in this regard. The first one was $525,000, and the second one was $895,000. These are funds that are set up for either addressing folks that have been made homeless and how to help them, or more importantly, how to keep people from becoming homeless. And so this is part of what funds our HAT team, our homeless assistance team, for example, under a normal year. So out of that first $525,000, about $300,000 of that has already been expended for the purposes of housing our homeless population that may have been exposed to COVID. So we, in partnership with a couple of other folks, we've provided housing that's available for individuals that are homeless that ultimately get COVID testing and need to self-quarantine, or may actually have to stay out for 14 days, those types of things. But the remainder of those dollars still are available for identifying their use. And I'll total all this up in the end when we get down to the end. These are pretty restrictive dollars, and unfortunately, HUD has not yet put out the final rules associated with how to spend these dollars. And I'll give you a good example of that. They're usually restricted to the absolute lowest income individuals in our community. If that income restriction doesn't exist, these dollars suddenly become available to help defray the risk of eviction. So you could actually use them to help defer rent payments or mortgage payments for folks that have fallen behind. We can still do that, but it's under those very, very strict income limits right now. If they actually raise or lift those, it would broaden the reach of that. So that's an example of what those dollars are for. Similar to the CDBG monies, there's a timeliness element to these, but not the calendar year. We have a little more flexibility associated with that. So that's the third bucket of revenue. The fourth bucket is $500,000 that the city has pulled out of its economic development fund to put into this effort. So these are general fund dollars. These are the least restricted. So there's $500,000 that essentially, for any legal purpose, we can use to address whatever it is that we think are the priorities as we go forward with those. Don't have a timeliness element, don't have any of the federal restrictions attached to this, just our own local obligations in state law, obviously, associated with that one. There also may, as we go through this process, we have an entire team of our staff that's actually identifying other possible grant resources. So it's possible other revenues may come in during this process as well. But those are the 4 big buckets. And when you add all of that up, what it means is we have somewhere around $7.7 million that we can make available to allocate toward these efforts with all kinds of timelines and all kinds of different restrictions. But just kind of keep in the back of your mind, $7.7 million available. I'll also highlight that in addition to those funds, the Roanoke City Public Schools directly received $6 million out of these same kinds of funds to help offset some of their costs at responding to their needs with COVID. So they got about $6 million, or a little over $6 million. The Roanoke Airport actually received $20 million. So they have $20 million that they're using to offset the impacts of COVID as well, and they're also programming their dollars. And then finally, Valley Metro, our transit service, received about $8 million in direct aid That's actually what was being used to enable fare-free ridership, as an example. So those dollars are out there and being committed. I only mention those dollars just so you're aware of some of the other funding that has come into the community to help. And of course, all of that is on top of the small business assistance programs that were out there for the payroll protection, as well as the emergency loan programs and stuff as well. So I'm going to pause there because I know that was a ton of information associated with those dollars and stuff, and see if there are any questions about the funding that we have access to. Oh, and Mayor, are you okay? Are you back with us?
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm on another machine, but I'm back.
Thank you, Mayor. So if you have a question, if you would unmute yourself and sort of wave your hand, and we'll try to see what you got.
Bob.
Yes.
There are several questions in the chat box. If you all can take a look at that. I don't know if you can scroll up.
Yeah, can you, because I see Tamia is on there, so let's see.
There are a couple from Tamia and Abby.
So right there with Abby. So Abby's asking that surrounding localities are also receiving CARES Act funding. Also, the similar structure will be a point at which localities would be coordinating efforts as recommendations are implemented. That's a great question, Abby, and I didn't mention this earlier. I should say that, and I will mention a piece of this a bit later, but we're a little bit behind some of the other communities, and that's a little bit intentional. I mentioned that June 1st was when we actually received the money. It's sitting in the bank right now from the state. Some of the other, a lot of other communities just went to council and said, put money into this. Our council wanted to engage with the community before doing that. We felt like they felt like it would be more targeted and more sustainable if we pulled you all together to help them determine that piece of it. The advantage is we now know what some of those other communities are using their dollars for, so we can kind of sort of piggyback, if you will, off of what they're thinking about. And in answer to your question, Abby, it's possible. I'll give a good example where we are actually right now in conversation about using some of that third that I set aside for city things to see if we all can jointly sponsor more testing activities for the community. That would be an example of doing that. Certainly you probably likewise, especially if we get into kind of the nonprofit sector, because so much of the work that you all do and others transcends kind of those, obviously those city boundaries. And I do think there's an opportunity for doing that as well as we move forward. So yes, that's a good question. I think something for all of us to kind of keep in mind as we go forward. Tamia's asked, she said that's a lot of money to be distributed. Says 20 organizations could receive $286,500. She was doing math fast each. Says, where can we find the requirements of the use for each of these dollars? Right now, the best we have are the two documents that I sent to you that kind of highlight the FAQs. What I will also do is I'll dig out the actual congressional act associated with CARES, which gives a little bit more insight, but not a great deal more insight. And again, just keep in mind, each of them have different, as we go through the process of talking and kind of brainstorming ideas, we'll start pulling in those rules more to kind of offer us a check against those ideas. So hopefully that helps a little bit. But it is a little confusing because there isn't much guidance with them as we go along. And then Abby was asking clarification what the start date is for the allowable expenses of the funds that'll be allocated. Q&A stated March 1, but are they same for various funding pools, and with the recommendations allowed to be backdated when they only cost from the time of approval? You sound like a grant administrator, Abby. It's a little bit of all of that. The $500,000, for example, that the city has is, again, really largely free of constraints that you would find in a typical grant. So no issue. It does appear that with the CARES funding, it will be reimbursable, but probably not reimbursable before the CARES Act was approved, if that makes sense. So even though we may be in July before we will be in July before we would be able to start awarding dollars. If it was an expenditure that was eligible and it was a program we wanted to fund that was incurred, say in April, that does appear to be eligible. An example they gave was if you were a community that was paying hazard pay, for example, on your frontline employees, you could use CARES funding to reimburse you for that expenditure. And so definitely you have those. You had to have tracked it all along, but you would definitely be able to do those things. So I do believe that's the case. To me, it's changing her math now. She says the number is actually $385,000 for 20 organizations. And Ellen has asked, are there additional funds expected following the governor's detail for eviction prevention on Monday? Great question. So the governor's allocated, I think it was $50 million, actually out of this same source of money. So state of Virginia got about $2 billion out of the CARES Act, and like 500 million of it, or 650 million of it, was sent to the localities. That's what we're dealing with. The rest they have kept, and they are now in the process of also deciding how they can use those dollars. The $50 million that the governor announced on Monday to deal with evictions or prevention of evictions comes out of their bucket of money, and they haven't yet said how they're going to actually, whether that's going to be a state-led program or whether they'll send any of that down to the localities. So it is possible. I will also say the act set up a scenario where if the states choose, they can provide a second round of funding to the localities as well. They've not indicated in Virginia if they're going to do that. Matter of fact, I don't think any state has indicated that they're going to do that yet, but that possibility is also there. And then to me, it was asking, how is the city handling the $12 million shortfall? We've reduced expenditures. That's why there are some, and I know Shalene is on this phone call or on the video, and there are some, such as the cultural endowment, that bore the brunt of those reductions. And we actually had to reduce our expenditures by that amount, by that $12 million over those 2 years. So there are services that we are no longer able to offer in the city because of that. And I should say, there has been very aggressive lobbying by all of the cities across the country and by our senators and representatives in this area to release the restrictions on funding that's coming from the federal government to be able to replenish some of those localities' lost revenue. And that has not borne any fruit yet with it. Jan is saying that it sounds like a lot of money, but there are hundreds of organizations that might want it for a lot of different projects. And to be really effective, there will need to be plans to carry forward into 21, since recovery from past similar types of emergencies last 2 years on average. Very good and very good point, and exactly why you all are here, because we really want to prioritize this funding. We want it to give the most significant benefit to our residents, our businesses, and again, remember, in making us more resilient and addressing where we're able to the inequities that might already exist. And absolutely, it is true that these things are going to bridge way beyond the end of this calendar year. And that's part of the reason the council has blended some of this funding so that we have some funding that will be able to go beyond the calendar year. I know I was in a meeting yesterday with Landon and with Brian, and the hotel industry is looking out to like 2023 before some of them actually fully recover where we were in 19. So the impacts are going to definitely be prolonged, and Carol made that reference as well, going out to 22. So those are great questions. Any other questions that anyone might have, and you can ask these or chat, whatever is the easiest way for you all. I'm looking at the screen, so everybody good where we're at right now, kind of understand? To me is asking, how are we going to benchmark the impact? And that's a very good example, or a very good question as to, we've all been very focused on how do we get the money and how do we figure out how to spend the money. It's a really good point that we also need to be thinking about how we're documenting what it is that we're trying to achieve with the money, and then therefore, how did we do? Interestingly, the CARES Act didn't ask for much accountability. I think the expectation of our community, I think certainly of you all, is that accountability to say, hey, if we thought this would help keep people from being evicted, for example, and we spent the dollars, did it work? What were the results of that? That will help us also kind of fine tune it as we go forward in the outlying years and stuff with it as well. So very good. All right, well, if that works, we can always come back for more questions, certainly. But Mayor, if you wouldn't mind then, if we can move to item number 5.
Which is the review of example initiatives for other jurisdictions. And you alluded to that, Bob, but could you tell us about what's going on in the other jurisdictions?
Yeah, yes, I can. Thank you. And again, I will again apologize. You'll have to listen to me as much as you can. And I promise you, we're going to get to your part here in just a few moments. As I mentioned, we have the advantage of a lot of communities, and I will say some states moved much faster than Virginia in getting the money down to the localities. But even in Virginia, communities have started identifying how they're going to spend these dollars. So we've got the advantage of being able to look at what they've determined is eligible. And I will say that probably all the examples I'm about to share with you are really just associated with the CARES funding, and not with some of the other sources of funding that exist out there as well. Can everybody make sure they're on mute? Make sure. Thank you. So I'm just going to quickly run off some of these. And again, just keep in mind, these are all use of CARES funding. So Prince William County has identified $5 million for small business grants, and that's through their Industrial Development Authority. They specifically also highlighted home-based businesses and nonprofits in that funding. Roanoke County, and I don't know the exact amount, but they have a fairly sizable likewise small business grant program, which actually opens on July 6th. So on July 6th, they start taking applications for their program. They also have identified $320,000 to be able to enhance internet hotspots for students that need to be able to access internet for school. They have also identified $450,000 for mortgage and rent relief. In Lynchburg has identified $2.1 million for public health, and that runs a very, very broad range. They actually are buying 2 trash trucks, which I find interesting because they've had an increase in solid waste as a result of everybody being home and doing all of those projects that have come out there. The rest of theirs tends to be on like PPE and those kinds of things. Lynchburg is also spending $1 million on city facilities and technology to be able to respond to COVID, $2 million on small business support, and $2 million on schools. So they're actually providing funding in addition to what the state has already provided to their schools. And I've seen their list. They have an entire page-long list of things that the school is using that funding for, things like Chromebooks, wireless connections, those kinds of things. Galax is using $200,000 for small business grants. Richmond is kind of piecemealing theirs, and their most recent one was $6 million for eviction diversion going to rental assistance. Arlington is spending $500,000 on broadband expansion, $400,000 on food assistance, and $500,000 on rental assistance. Alexandria is providing $500,000 to their local health department to expand COVID testing capabilities, and $2.4 million for food access and delivery, $4 million for residential rental assistance, and $2.4 million for small business grants. And Danville is doing $3 million in small business grants and $500,000 to help offset utility bills that people have fallen behind. And Chesterfield, Virginia also has a similar program of offsetting utility bills that people have fallen behind on as well. And then again, there are literally volumes across the country of examples. I just wanted to kind of throw out there some of the examples that I'm aware of right now in Virginia as to how folks are allocating these dollars. But I do really believe that because ours is a blend, we have perhaps a bit wider diversity of what we can bring into the consideration or into the conversation than perhaps some of these other communities have been able to do so. So any questions about any of those examples?
Bob, you mentioned that there's a lot of small businesses funding out there to try and help small businesses, which is very important for economic stability in a community. What does that encompass? What are they offering the small businesses, or how are the funds being used?
Great question, and it varies a little bit, but there are some common themes. So the most common theme is in Virginia, locality governments are prohibited from providing funds directly to private interests in a grant form. So that's why we all use like our Economic Development Authority. So when you heard me say things like the Industrial Development Authority or the EDA, what they've done, all of them have in common that they're actually taking those dollars and providing them to their EDA or to their IDA, who then actually administers the program. So that's a common across all of them. All of them also have in common that these are all grants. Previously, everything we've been doing has been in the form of loans, and they may have been zero interest or even forgivable, but loans. But because these dollars have to be spent by the end of the year, everybody has shifted to a grant format. So these are not dollars that have to be repaid by those businesses. They just have to honor the performance requirement. So if money is provided, say, for example, so that they can invest in PPE or so that they can rehire folks that they had to furlough, they'll have to demonstrate that they did that. Then it kind of deviates from there. I've seen programs that focus, again, some of them have said we're only going to focus on businesses that are in the hospitality entertainment sector, or only those that are in restaurants. Some of them have not been that selective. Others have said that they're going to focus on micro businesses, people that only employ 5 employees or less. Some have expanded to include gig workers as well as home-based businesses. Others have not. I guess one other common thing I would say is almost all of them have focused on small businesses out of necessity, because the CARES Act does prescribe small businesses, and they have a definition in there. And my recollection is it's like 50 employees or less. There's some other stipulations attached to it, and that's pretty common across the whole as well. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now with those.
Hey, Bob, I have a question. With the money the $6 million that is allocated to Roanoke City Public Schools, will we know the breakdown of how the schools are going to apply that, so that we'll know what the needs are, if there are any needs, that $6 million will not be covering?
Yeah, I would say there'd be 2 things we would probably do as a part of this is, the school board will obviously receive from the superintendent a proposal on how those dollars would be allocated, and the school board would ultimately have to approve that. So there'll become an itemized list with those. And so we'll reach out to the school board to see where they are on the development of that and make that available to this group. The other thing we could do as well is what Lynchburg did is they asked specifically of the superintendent,
right,
what unmet needs exist. And then they generated a list, and we can do that as well so that we can have that here also as a part of this.
Okay, and the reason why I was asking, because I know that we're having a new superintendent come in July 1st. So, not knowing where we were as far as if a committee had already been working on allocating that money within the school board or not, know what we would need to do it. So,
and I don't know if they have, my sense is that they got the money about the same time we did, and they probably have not yet started on defining those. I'm sure most of the schools in Virginia are going to allocate a significant amount of the dollars to both transportation and to probably laptops or Chromebooks or something.
Hey, Erica.
But I don't know.
You step in here a minute.
So we'll definitely want to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking over here at questions again. So Rachel asked about what application process might it look like for the city of Roanoke. Roanoke, will we be making funding recommendations or present a grant submission process and review those applications? Yeah, great question, because I referenced a couple of other kinds of boards that we have as a city that review applications. This group will not be doing that. What we'll be doing is we'll be making recommendations kind of at the program
What's happening?
similar to what I just mentioned with these other categories.
Yeah,
Where I've said, for example, we may say, yeah, we'd like to put money toward helping small businesses. And when we say small businesses, we really want to focus in this area. That's it. That would be the work of this group. Then if council concurs with that, then we turn that over to our economic development group, our economic development authority, and they actually package up the applications that are needed and those kinds of things. So that's how we'll go through this as we go forward with the process and stuff. I think that also will be necessary in light of the time that we have, because if we were to get down into those details, you
can't hear them?
No, they can't hear me. I can't hear them.
Yeah. The mayor has technical problems. Can you tell? Tommy was asking, seeing so much
right here
is going to be happening online. Will internet and cell phones for businesses be considered a utility? Most other programs leave that out in the past. That's a good question, Tommy, and I don't know. That's a question we can ask. about that. I do know that some other communities have used some of these funds to help businesses get an online presence. So they may not have had an online presence and now need to open up an online store to be able to do that. And I know the funds have been used for that. I don't know about your specific question, so we'll definitely put on that on the list of questions that we can ask as well. Mia's asking if the money has to be spent by the end of the year, what outcomes does the city expect to see? Again, we'll develop those as we go through this process. And remember, not all of the money we're dealing with will have to be spent by the end of the calendar year, just the big chunk of it. Jan was asking, typically the city requests grant applications from organizations that have project ideas, and each one would have a projected outcome. The city would fund those projects and so on. That will still happen, but it's going to happen kind of on the back end of this. So again, if we talk about making funding available for nonprofits, for example, most likely that would be turned over to our Human Service Advisory Board, and they would go through the same kind of process they do, just faster, in order to actually secure applications and arrive at those very outcomes. I think the outcomes we'll want out of this effort are much higher level. Things like, what are we trying to accomplish in terms of keeping people in their homes, addressing inequities, trying to get a certain amount of economic activity, those types of things. And then Elda was asking, there are local small and micro businesses who have been unable to secure PPP and the emergency loans. Definitely an area to be considered for fund. Great, because this goes back to something I think that Troy asked. Most communities, and I think this may be a requirement on the CARES funding piece of it, but I need to validate this. Most communities have indicated that if they're going to offer a small business grant program, if you have already benefited from one of the other federal programs, you may not be eligible to receive it. So a lot of the communities have turned it around and said, we're going to put an emphasis on those that either didn't apply or haven't received it or were excluded. Landon knows this as an example, that there's a class of nonprofits that were excluded from those 501c6s that weren't even able to apply for some of those. So that could be an area that you would focus your energy on as well. I do need to validate, though, if the
in two places.
funding prohibits the use of, if you've already received those funds, are you excluded? And again, our money wouldn't necessarily, but you all, part of your recommendation may be that we really want to focus on folks that have not yet received benefits. You know, one of the challenges I think is going to be, and some of you have benefited from those programs, is, you know, those programs are about to run out. And so it's tough that if you draw a hard line that says if you got it, that was your only time of not getting it when it's no longer benefiting you. So I don't know how that's going to get worked out at the congressional level. And then Tamia asked about if we have anybody on banks on the task force. We don't, and I didn't mention this, we have actually two other efforts that run alongside of this. One of those is an economic development advisor.
But Joe can carry out the rest of the meeting.
That meeting is made up of about a dozen folks that are meeting every 3 weeks to help advise our leadership and our economic development folks. And there are 3 bankers on that group. So we'll definitely be tapping into them as well. And also the council folk conducted, several of you took part in these, a series of focus group meetings across each of these different sectors that we've talked about, where they pulled folks together to kind of get their feelings on how things are going and where there are gaps and needs. And we have notes from those, and I'll make those notes available to you all as well so that you have an opportunity to look at what others have said previously about the needs are that exist within the community as a part of that effort. All right, any other questions about that piece of it? All right, great, thank you all. Joe, if you wouldn't mind then, if you would like to move us to the part where I get to stop talking soon, so.
Before we do that, Bob, there's one other, actually, 2 questions that came up or remarks in the chat box. One from Chris Bryant: could any of the money be directed to the Roanoke Valley Broadband Authority to help with better residential service?
Yes, I do think that is possible. I think that those other communities that I mentioned that were addressing either broadband or hotspots, we're actually partnering with somebody else to actually do that. So the Broadband Authority would be one of our logical partners, I think, if we move down that path, absolutely. And then Jan typed in that it sounds like these funds can't be given to individuals. Does that mean that the city couldn't give funds to individuals to help them with things like rent, utilities, or other necessities? No, I do think that is possible. It would just be done through somebody else. So I'll use Abby as an example where I'll use the utility offset. So right now, the Water Authority has a program in partnership with United Way where folks that have fallen behind on being able to make their utility payment can go to the United Way and make an application to secure funds. This program, if we do something with that, we would probably partner.
Is this the computer you're running on?
And with United Way,
what is this?
Those dollars to them, and then people would make that application through that. So individuals would be able to do to access these funds. They would just access them through one of the other providers in the community. And then Abby was saying, given that the CARES Act was written and approved months ago, the overall design doesn't adequately reflect the realities today that we're facing. That's for sure. Do we anticipate changes to happen? I hope, I wish. I mean, I have to admit that, you know, as a local government, rather than them worrying about a fourth or fifth stimulus package, what I wish they would do is just simply change the restrictions on what they've already pushed out there, because then it would allow, you know, the state, like I said, the state has $2 billion that really they're going to struggle with trying to figure out how to spend. And if they would just release some of the restrictions on that, I think they could get a lot more creative with it versus spending all the energy of trying to create a fourth or fifth stimulus package. But there's no indication yet that they're going to, there is growing indication that there's going to be another individual stimulus package, but not necessarily a bigger kind of governmental kind of assistance package as we go on. But yeah, we'll obviously keep watching that as well. Tamia is asking, are all the organizations that provide services to the residents in Roanoke City aware of 7 million? Absolutely not. No, I think the awareness will begin with this meeting. So I'll let you all know that after this meeting is over, we'll be issuing a press release to kind of get out to the media. They're aware that this group was formed, but then we'll start explaining to them what the work is that you all are doing. There will be a dedicated part of our website which focuses just on this effort, and a part of your bylaws that you approved does require one public hearing as we advance on those recommendations to try to expand the knowledge that exists within the community about this program. And then Chris is asking, could some of the grants be given to those agencies that are helping with the COVID issues like Bradley Free Clinic, Rescue Mission, Ram House? Absolutely. That's absolutely, very, very few of these dollars do I expect will actually be delivered by the city. It'll actually be partnerships with all these other folks as we go forward. Any of these funds be used? This question again, can any of these funds be used to pay salaries to interim support personnel who can work directly with families? Quite possibly through one of our partners again. So if somebody was actually hiring, I'll use mental health for example. So if Blue Ridge Behavioral came in and said, you know, we actually could use more mental health counselors in light of the spike that we're seeing from folks that are dealing with the stresses with COVID, then funds could be put toward that effort to hire those or pay those salaries for that. So yes, I do believe that that could be done. Elda's asking, circling back to small and micro businesses as well as nonprofits, minority owned run have received less approval for PPP and the loan program. This is an opportunity to implement the equity component. Absolutely. That's exactly the way in which we would infuse the recommendations with that equity side of things. I will say the same is true on the unemployment statistics. So those 11,000 folks that I mentioned that are unemployed are disproportionately low income and tend to be minority and mostly Hispanic, because if you think about it, most of the layoffs have come in the and many of the folks that are employed at the lower income levels in those sectors tend to be African American and Hispanic. So absolutely, that's going to be a part of what we would be wanting to look at with this. Pete was saying, if funds are given to a nonprofit partner to distribute, do those funds have to be spent by 12/30 or just issued to the partner by then, speaking only to the CARES funds? Yeah, unfortunately, that was one of the FAQs that was asked by local governments, and it has to be spent. You know, we were really hoping they would come back and say, as long as it has been appropriated out to somebody, that would be good enough, but no, on the CARES funding has to be spent. Carol is asking, a key piece for resiliency will be increasing access to both computers and good internet connectivity, particularly with respect to equity. Absolutely. And when you all, for those of you that didn't participate in it, when you see the notes from those focus group meetings that the council led, you will see that reflected across just about every sector. That concern expressed that people, either folks they've sent home to telework, or students that are actually trying to go to school, not having access to dependable and reliable internet and broadband connections. So absolutely that will be, and I think you're even seeing that, as I mentioned, just about every community that has awarded funds or dedicated funds have picked up some aspect of broadband or internet connection as well. Great question. So y'all have actually already moved into the next item, because really that item was really about ideas and really starting to generate those ideas. And you've already kind of started that process. And so I'd like to continue that with you all. And again, if you start to kind of think of things that are at that kind of programmatic level, saying things like, broadband, is a priority that we really need to think about. How do we get internet connections strengthened so that folks that don't have access to it can do? That's the level that we're looking at. That, after that, who does that? How? Even how much money? We'll get to that later. We're just kind of looking at that broad-based piece as we go in as well. So, at this point, Mayor and Joe, I mean, the idea here is the best we can do with 30-something folks. And actually, the chat seems to be working really well. So, if that works for everybody, or again, if you're not able to chat, anybody that wants to kind of join in and offer, except I did say I made one promise for Joe here, that I was recently a part of a webinar where the conversation was going on, and they said, how do you get more ideas generated, a diverse set of ideas generated than what you might normally get in the normal set of attendance? And they said, well, one of the ways they found is that often younger participants in meetings tend to take a back seat to the more elder or more senior members of the group as sort of a sign of respect for it and stuff. And so they suggested that when you get into that kind of brainstorming, always start with the youngest groups that are in attendance. So I'm going to ask you all to be honest here. I'm not going to ask anybody's individual age, but I would like to start with this question about ideas, kind of things you're thinking about that might be of value. And I'd like to start with anybody right now that's under 30. So let's start with that group. So if you identify as being under 30, you may feel like you're under 30, but this is really what's on your birth certificate. So if you're under 30, if you have an idea of the kinds of things we ought to be thinking about, if you would unmute yourself and do that, or if you would chat it, either one of those. And if you don't have any ideas, that's fine. But if you've got those ideas, I'd like to start with that group first, and then we'll kind of move into that next group that'll be kind of under 50 at that point. So anybody under 30 that wants to throw out an idea. Not seeing anything yet, and that's okay. All right, well, oh wait, Brian's jumping in here. So Brian's saying some tourism marketing funding to help restore hospitality jobs and small business revenues would be helpful. So that's our first idea out of that question, is dealing with tourism marketing. So there have been some communities that have recognized that one of the ways to restart or jumpstart their local economy is to begin more aggressively marketing to the outside world, that they still have stuff to come to and do and spend their money on. And so certainly that kind of marketing is an eligible activity when it's tied directly to that kind of thing. So that's a good one, Brian.
Bob?
Yes.
Could I shift that, realizing that our youth citizen board reps may not be here? I think it's important that we, prior to our next meeting, really engage them in some conversation so that their voices are a part of this. But would it be for folks who are on this call who directly work with children and youth, is there a way for us to reflect from your experience and from what you're hearing from children and youth and their families in terms of priorities, particularly through the lens of equity? We've heard some of those ideas already, but I think for those of you who work directly with children and youth, it would be beneficial for us to hear from you. And I'm thinking about Jarrell, Bethany, with your work with the Refugee Partnership, I can look around the room here, Karen with mental health, Tony with mental health. I can't see everyone on the screen, but if we could hear from some of you, that would be really great.
Joe, I know, so I'm, to Bob's point, you know, I'm 60, so I'll be the first to talk in a meeting if needed. We spoke yesterday on a United Way call, and my anticipation, and I spoke with Roanoke City Schools yesterday about this as well, is that the school schedule is going to be something that all of us are going to need to jump in and support the kids and the families with. Because if you look at what Roanoke County suggested last night, parents are going to be able to work out in the world, and the world is going to open up, and the kids are going to be at home several days, if not every day, doing instruction. So, and the schools are just not going to have the capacity to provide instruction, transportation, food, meals, childcare, all the things that the schools do for our families and our kids typically. And so as somebody who convenes community after school centers into a collaborative, I think that they have an ability to support and help, but they don't know they don't know where their needs are going to be yet. So I think for the families and the kids, it's the school, it's that bringing back in a limited way is really going to impact instruction, their next year instruction, and employment.
Thank you, Karen. Who else? Jarrell?
Yeah, Joe, definitely. Thank you for the question. And just to piggyback off what Karen was saying, the thing that I'm really, really concerned with being a guidance coordinator, just the fact that you're going to have students that, like she said, will be at home. And if they do get to the building, we don't know what that's going to look like yet. But those that are at home, they need the resources that they would be able to get in the classroom in traditional teaching. To just give kids an assignment and expect them to have it done, and then hopefully if we can get everybody back in school, I would say at the beginning of the school year, the beginning of the year, a lot of kids are going to be left behind for a lot of different reasons. So it's just being able to, that's what I was asking about, what the money would be used for, that $6 million. And if we knew what the school system was going to do with it, just to put something in place for resources. That's the thing that scares me the most, is will they have the resources they need when they need them to keep them, above water until they can get back in front of a teacher on a consistent basis. I think that's very, very important. I think that's something that we really need to look at, as well as, like she said, the meals. Some kids, however that's going to work, if we can figure out a plan, and maybe that's not for us to do, maybe that's for the school system to do. But the main thing is making sure that they have what they need, the extra resources outside of just receiving an assignment and finding a way to look it up and say, okay, I have to get this done. I really think we have to turn our eyes towards that and really take a strong look at it, because if not, kids are going to be behind as they enter back into the school system. Well, enter back in the classroom, I'll say that way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I would like to add and support what you're saying. I think it's so important to get kids back into the school. And I know there's varying opinions on that, but children learn better when they're captivated by who they're learning from. So very important to again get the students back into the classroom safely.
Thank you, Troy. Bethany, what are you hearing from the refugee immigrant community?
Yeah, I reached out to each level of our organization to see what they were seeing within the community and how, through the task force that could be helpful for refugees and immigrants in the community, and reached out to some other resources too. And most of what I'm hearing is around childcare. Like if kids are not going back to school, all of these families, the parents are still having to work. They don't have, the luxury of working from home when they're working in factories, working on, a line somewhere. So I'm hearing lots of childcare assistance, the need for one-on-one education if kids are going to have to be home, then they're going to have some sort of tutoring, some sort of one-on-one focus, which goes along with what others have already said, and access to internet. I mean, so many of our kids are not able to get on the internet. It's always spotty, or there's only one laptop, and a lot of our families have 5 kids in the same apartment. And it's just not going to work that way. Chromebooks have gone back to the school for the summer, and so a lot of that education that some students are getting over the summer is not being able to be accessed by the people that we work with, our families. So a lot of education, childcare needs have to be met, and that one-on-one assistance is going to be really, really important. Those are some major barriers that we're seeing. And on the other side of it, I put in the chat as well, I believe it's going to be absolutely vital for increased mental health services. I'm already seeing an influx of need, and everyone that I know in mental health right now is just overwhelmed by referrals, because people are starting to see the impacts of trauma that this situation has created for people. Like I was saying, it meets all the preconditions of trauma, which is that lack of predictability and job loss and loss of connection to others, and that loss of sense of safety. All of those pieces are, have been missing for quite some time now. And I think we're just seeing the beginning of it. And so many people can't access mental health services when they're in poverty, because it tends to cost a lot of money. And we're seeing a bigger wave of people. A lot of times people who have never accessed mental health services before are now accessing it because they're desperate for these services, and a lot of people cannot afford it. And so those are my main pieces that I'm advocating for.
Thank you. Dr. Brenda Hale, what are you hearing from youth regarding youth and children through NAACP and some of the folks you're talking with?
Well, they have a concern. There are a lot of young people in Northwest Roanoke that they don't have access to computers. There's some families, the only time that they have a computer is during the school year, where they have to sign for that. So when they're at home all this time, they don't have access to that. And they also don't have access to aftercare. That means that the mother or the father is working, and then they're home babysitting the other children. So they're behind already, because I know everybody knows there's studies that say during the summer periods that they lose a lot that they've learned during the school year. So when they go back to school, they're behind, because they have not had any access to maintaining a percentage of what they have learned during the school year. So it's a big concern that they don't have the equipment that they need, and they don't have access to the help that they need, because they can't go to some of these areas in the city where they're in a learning environment. So there's a lack of not being in that learning environment.
Thank you, Brenda. Elda and Kat, perhaps others who may be engaged with the Latino, Latinx, and Hispanic communities. I know that as we've heard on this call, they've been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. What are some things you're hearing from these communities that we should raise up in terms of our initiatives?
I'll go ahead and jump in. I know Kat will have a lot more to add to it. Echoing what everybody has mentioned in terms of the availability of resources in order to do remote distance learning, as well as childcare. I think these are all common themes that every family or family group is feeling right now. Perhaps particular to the Latinx and other groups too is ELL, or English language learning, which is something that pretty much needs to happen in person. And from what I've heard, at least with Roanoke City Public Schools, they have a green light to bring back in the ELL learners, which include some Latino students and students from other groups, probably groups that Bethany works with. I think the key thing is the messaging to these families that it is safe to bring their kids back to school, that they should bring them back to school. So perhaps something we haven't mentioned yet is spending in media or advertising or something that's, I guess, marketing to call it something, messaging to individuals of resources that are available or things that are safe to do again. That on one side. Another group of youth that we haven't really mentioned are college-bound students and college students. And I think a concern there is college-bound college students who have lost opportunities in terms of jobs, whether it's jobs related to careers they're going into or just, summer jobs, money that they can use towards their college expenses. And I think that, being a mother of young kids, there's a lot more leeway to, if you will, manage kids who are not in a school. I'm not a mother of teenagers, but I know that hearing from friends who have teenagers at home who are not able to go get a summer job or go towards that college experience as they already know it or are expecting it, are feeling that trauma that Bethany has mentioned. And I think for those of us who are business owners who would normally be employing interns or seasonal workers or any other type of young people that we employ, there's really not much to employ them for. So I think that's a lost opportunity for young people. And I think we need to keep that age group in mind of, especially having a number of colleges in the region, what happens to those students that we would normally be employing for both career experience and also for their funds that they receive from work.
Thank you, Elda. Kat, would you like to add anything to that?
I think that, thank you for asking me. And also I think that Elda hit on a lot of the topics that included the child care, the availability of those resources like Wi-Fi, transportation. There's some families that aren't able to get unemployment or any type of benefits. So what happens to those families that have been laid off or furloughed and unable to get those benefits that some people do have? I guess most of my concern is also what Bethany talked about too, which was the trauma, domestic violence for children in the Roanoke City schools in particular, just because I'm in the PTA Central Council Board for all of Roanoke City schools. But I think that some money being spent on messaging and translating services or finding ways to get that message out to all of the community is money well spent. So just considering those type of avenues. I think that's all I have for now. Those were all my bullet points, but I mean, I'm certain I'll add some more soon.
Joe, may I say something?
Sure.
I just want to reiterate those points about community education, and that is something else that was coming up that I forgot to mention as well over and over again. One of those themes is getting the word out about what is safe and getting it out in a lot of different languages as well to multiple communities and finding those avenues to be able to do that.
Also, yes, Jarrell, go ahead.
Yeah, something I forgot to say. Even for those kids, if they do have a laptop or a Chromebook or whatever, the toughest part for them is being able to find what they're looking for to even get the assignments done. What we have found, my wife and I, we're both educators, and it was extremely hard for us to get our 4 kids through, and we work in the school system. So what you tend to find is a parent that's not, I would say, computer lit enough to understand, how do I navigate this thing to get to where I need to get my child's assignments and to actually get them done. So as we look at the kid, we got to look at the parents also and look at, okay, what do they need to be able to help their children get the assignments done, to get the things done in a timely manner. So I think that that's something that we do not want to overlook as we move forward. We want to make sure the kids have access, but the parents need to be brought up to a place to understand how to get to where they need to get to. Because I had so many parents, I would be just out working out, and I would see parents and say, look, they would say, hey, how did your son, he goes to Woodrow Wilson, how did he get his assignments done? And I'll tell them, you need to go to whatever. They're like, I can't figure it out. Don't worry about it. So, you know, we just don't want to leave them behind either because of the fact that their parents can't assist them where they need to be assisted.
Right. That's a great point, Jarrell. And I think as we're thinking through this, we have so many different sectors represented here.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of building these initiatives out is considering what kinds of community partnerships we can tap into to help this happen. Because it really benefits everybody and strengthens us as a city when we can collaboratively work together. Pamela Smith, are you still on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're hearing through youth advocates?
Well, our concern right now is when kids are going back into the school system, or even if they're not, the behavioral issues that are going to pop up with trauma that may get them involved with DJJ or social services, that kind of thing, and for us keeping them involved in community-based services. So having some kind of focus on that and not getting the kids outside of their homes when they really need the services to stay within the home.
Okay, thank you, Pamela. Debbie, I know that, yes, who was that? Debbie, I know that you and several others on the call work with the schools in terms of students who are homeless, experiencing homelessness. What are some things we should be aware of? We talked a lot about evictions and the repercussions of that and funding that may or may not be available to assist in terms of mortgage payments or rent assistance. Is there anything you would add or others on the call would add to that particular issue around homelessness that children and youth and families are experiencing?
Well, I think a lot of it's been touched on as far as the need for them to be able to have the software to keep up with the rest of the students. If they're continually moving in and out of one residency to another, then they lose track. The overbearing of the parents worrying about where they're going to live and making the payments, I think is a big deal, an issue. When we start talking about the food, I'm really interested to see what the schools are thinking about with doing any further meal preparation. I know some of the grab and go that's going on right now is going a little bit slower. So my concern with that, nutrition is an extremely important part of the educational component to me. Are we making sure that we are providing the best opportunities for the food to get to families? I'm wondering how many are really, truly getting the food. We stopped the pack of snacks that we were doing. We were sending out 500 to 700 every week because the grab and go had started off a little bit slow. So I'm concerned when we get back into the swing of things, making sure that there is nutrition going on. And once again, if the homeless are trying the best to get jobs, if they are still concerned about the child care. So I think all of this is being touched on. I just think that we're going to have to really pay some close attention to making sure that we are going to provide funding that people can remain within some residencies where they are to keep consistency going.
Thanks, Debbie. We've got about 15 minutes left. I'd like to shift a little bit to arts and culture and our small business communities. We have seen over these last few months remarkable resilience from all of these sectors, manufacturing, small business. When we talk about workforce development and our ROTEC program in the schools, how to provide transportation to sites for students who want to do internships. That question, along with what our arts organizations, nonprofit community, and small businesses have been doing to model resilience. Let's hear from some of the folks that are engaged in the arts community. because I think because of your, particularly because so much of what you generate energy and revenue from is audience-based, and that's in person, we're seeing a lot of organizations having to just completely stop those. And I can't remember who all is on the call. This impacts some of tourism as well, but Shalene, Rachel with the museum, can you all talk a little bit, Landon, your knowledge base with these organizations, can you all talk a little bit about the impacts you're seeing and what kinds of initiatives might be helpful to address those concerns? Shalene, I'll have you go first, then Landon, then Rachel. If Shalene's still on the call. I am not seeing or hearing her.
No, I don't see her anymore, Joe, on there.
Okay, Landon, can you talk a little bit with us?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I will say that our arts organizations have been dramatically impacted, especially those that depend on audiences. I think about Mill Mountain Theater, our children's theater, the symphony orchestra. So many of those wonderful assets or offerings in our community are really in jeopardy right now. So anything we can do to assist them, I think would be certainly a high priority. And I just saw in the paper today that the symphony is furloughing almost all their employees right now. And the 3 that are remaining are taking salary cuts. And they're having to move to a new office location because they can't afford rent. So all of that is pretty tough, and we don't want to lose those great assets. The other thing is that I do know several of our museums have closed down, but they plan on opening up. But you know, the traffic is not going to be there where it can be supportive of them financially. So I think any grants that we can provide to these attractions would be much appreciated, and hopefully they can stay on their feet, and we'll get the visitors back that and the residents supporting them eventually.
Thank you, Landon.
You know, yeah, if I could jump in, an idea that came to mind to try and get people in these places, is it possible for the city to set aside money as a voucher program to get people to restaurants, to get people to these cultural events, where if the people attend, they get a voucher for a free meal or something like that? Is that a realistic use of these funds?
That's a great question. Bob, I don't know, is that something you can...
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, one way you might, it goes back to somebody had talked, I think it was actually Brian mentioned kind of the sort of the marketing piece. And I would imagine that you could devise something that would say as a part of a marketing campaign that is to assist in getting folks to return to these cultural institutions includes that kind of thing that Troy just mentioned, and that it's a part of it. It would seem to me that that would be something that would be worthy of exploring, that would seem to fall within the confines of what those dollars are for, but certainly we would explore more, but it doesn't seem like it's out of bounds.
Okay, Shalene is on the call. Before we get to you, Rachel, she's muted. Tiffany,
hey.
Are you there, Shalene?
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Shalene. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for the tip on star 6. I really appreciate it. I think that just for arts and culture sector, you really can't, they're so vital for getting the economy rebooted. But unfortunately, that I feel like the arts and culture is the first to close and then the last to reopen, because especially for performance arts. And so that's just something that I think we all need to kind of keep aware of. I liked some of the ideas that were being tossed around just now. So that's just my first thing. I'm going to I'm gonna reach out to a bunch of people that I know and kind of get some more feedback before our next meeting. So I'll have more input at that time. But yeah, that's all I got for now, Joe.
Thank you. Rachel, I want to go to you and then to Cynthia Lawrence, who can give us a little bit about Mill Mountain. Rachel, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you, Joe, for giving us an opportunity to share our thoughts. I want to say that the day that the schools closed, the day that RCPS announced closing, that the museum closed, we're an organization that supports 28 households, and to this day we support 28 households, and we needed that time because we've been doing a lot of important work. And I always say the most important work we've been doing is listening. We were able and very fortunate that the schools, not only Roanoke City Public Schools, but Botetourt, City of Salem, and Roanoke County made time, educators, parents, and science administrators and other administrators in May to speak with us. And we wanted to listen. What does the future look like? What are your concerns? What are you scared of? And fear, I would say everyone's scared. And I can just say, I want to echo, Gerald and Bethany, when you shared your thoughts, that is some of the things that we've heard and experienced. Number one, we have, of course, we're all about educational empowerment, working in schools and having students come with us. But right now, we're just as concerned with mental health. All of our educators are now trauma informed. And as I said before, right now, when I'm thinking about my job and our mission, I'm not just thinking, how am I going to work with schools? I'm thinking, how am I going to work with parents? Because we are teaching, we're moving into a time, we just went through it, we got thrown to it, but now we have to very intentionally have that be a collaborative conversation, because we are collaboratively teaching. Parents are doing their best, the teachers are doing their best. So moving forward, some of the things I see is each school system, RCPS saying we are going to deliver virtual instruction through one platform. So that makes that navigation process for parents a little bit easier, but I honor the way they did it. It's just because we were thrown to the wolves. Now moving forward, what I see and the role the museum is playing is in the fall. All of this information we collected, we then turned around and we shared to the schools, parents, and educators, administration. So in the fall, we are closing our doors to general public, just as we're doing now. We're going to be using our 50,000 square feet of space for childcare and enrichment. And we're modeling this after our experience of being people who are vendors for community, 21st century community learning centers. We took Hurt Park to nationals with the Kid Win Challenge last year. We're very proud of that. We're doing, beginning of the day, we will be working with students to help them with virtual learning, but also teaching them the skills to be collaborative with other students. Because that's one thing I witnessed with students, is that when they couldn't figure something out and their parents couldn't figure something out, they worked together, okay? It was probably one of the most amazing. So this technology, making sure that a barrier to learning is not lack of technology, is so important right now. And I don't care if that's a cell phone in the hand of a child or a laptop, they will figure out how to use it and get help. So we want to model that in the first part of the day. In the second part of the day, we want to bring in some of that in instruction and enrichment that we have experience with. And so number one, we're meeting their needs, their social needs. We're going to make sure we're doing it in a manner that acknowledges trauma. We're going to make sure that we're doing it in a manner that empowers them. And also helps parents and alleviates these issues of childcare. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. So moving forward, I think that we have to look at things in a systemic and a holistic perspective, and not so categorically. We have to work together. We have to collaborate. And I love someone said, churches are looking at this. How can we use our space? So yes, as a museum, we're stepping outside of our lane. We're not mission creeping though, but this is the time to do that so we can survive. And so I'm pumped about it, as you can see. And luckily, like I said, 28 households strong. My team has been working their butts off to make this happen, but by listening and understanding what these needs are.
Thank you, Rachel. Cynthia, can you share a little bit about Mill Mountain? And then I want to do one more thing before I turn it back over to Bob for next steps.
Sure, I'll be brief. Thank you, Vice Mayor. We met as a board and staff this morning, actually, with the chair of medicine and then the infectious disease specialist, Dr. Paul Skolnick, who is advising us on procedures, safe procedures for performers, patrons, and all of our staff and those that we touch along the production route of a show. At this point, Mill Mountain Theater still has its holiday production on the calendar, and we're weighing very carefully the risk factors of moving forward with that. But I would just offer to this group that Mill Mountain is going to do the responsible thing, and we are, I guess, in a fortunate position in that we've got the financial resources to take a gap year if we need to. But we are going about this in a very scientific and thoughtful way. So we are encouraged. The one thing, the variable is, will people come? If we take all of these steps, will people come? The additional expenses, and more to the point of this meeting today, the theater would be faced with putting in an air filtration system and some other precautions that are capital expenses. And so if this group could consider those environmental improvements as part of this grant exercise, I think that would be a wise thing to discuss, even if there's no solution yet.
That's a great point, Cynthia. Thank you. I wanted to say too that you know what's really powerful about what's emerged through this conversation is how everyone who has spoken has really talked about equity and what that looks like. And that's really powerful. We're understanding that in ways that we have not before. I think, Rachel, the point you made about how we look at this systemically through equity, and how we look at this differently as a city, and what not only the short-term realities are and how we can address those, but the longer-term realities and how we can sustain those through what we create now. We haven't heard a lot from, I mean, we've heard bits and pieces from our small business community, and I think about minority-owned businesses, thinking about how this might look in developing those further or creating greater access, how they may have been impacted in disproportionate ways. Joyce, Tommy, I know you all interact a lot with the business community in different ways. Just briefly, can you, the two of you and maybe others, add just to that piece of the conversation?
Be happy to. You know, our Small Business Development Center has really seen like a almost 400% kind of increase in who they're serving. The need is really great in trying to help these small businesses survive. I will just say that in prep for the next meeting too, I'll get sort of some categories of areas where the need is the greatest. I am grateful that the city's doing this, Roanoke County's doing, everyone's doing something. Just learned earlier this week that Downtown Roanoke Inc. is also going to be providing some, offering some small business grants as well. They don't have that out yet. But I'm just reminded that I think it's the Source's Facebook Resource Hub, 40% of small businesses do not reopen after a natural disaster, and I think that's probably the best gauge we have for this. I would say unless they do get the help that is needed to get them through this, to help them make significant changes and pivots, that will, and we are seeing a lot more innovation, but ways to help address some of those issues. It's not, some of it, like you mentioned with retail, I mean, those kind of small businesses have their own set of issues. Others, whether they're one person or micro under 5 or under 25 employees, you know, they're just hanging on, if you will, in some respects. Saw this in the Great Recession, and some of them made it, some did not. So I will actually get that. I think there also are some very hopeful signs, and they're seeing that with many of them finding different ways to provide their services, being innovative, like I mentioned, and probably will pull through all that's being done through these kinds of mechanisms, like what the city's doing, can be a really big help to make sure that that's a higher probability.
Thank you, Joyce. Tommy, what would you like to add?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I really appreciate it. I just really wanted to draw attention to that for the minority communities, specifically minority small businesses, that we pay attention to, that they don't get clumped in with the other services that are also being asked for. Everyone needs their own support. We have a lot of minority nonprofit organizations that render help and things like that. But the small businesses, I've watched about 4 businesses in the minority community have to shut doors because a lot of them in the food service industry, where everyone is hurting. But it's been a challenge before. But right now, if we're speaking on equity, if we're looking into that to really make sure access is there for the businesses who are finding a way to try to sustain through this. I even alluded to the point of being able to find some way of getting other content creators out there to start getting their business to the marketplace online. So just putting energy and stuff there, and so that the business owners are not also getting clumped in with just general services for the impoverished area of Northwest. So just making sure we're delineating those two and render support to both of those is going to be my focus.
Thank you.
It sounded like that it's not only financial, but also needs to be shared and helped to some of these small business owners. Is that a fair statement?
Definitely, but I mean, that's been even before then, but it's more prevalent even now that, you know, everyone's restarting. So coming out the gate, everyone having a fair shot at it, which in the past, that has been one of the voices of our community that we just don't get to the table. So I'm not saying that has anything to do with what we're doing. That's why I'm so glad that this is happening with us, that we make sure we optimize on it.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, everybody. I know that we heard a lot of voices and we weren't able to hear everyone. I think this is the beginning of our work. And as so many of you said, please talk to people that you're in contact with and find a way to bring that information together to be shared with this task force, because the more information we have from the people in our community, the more we can really take all of this into consideration as we're developing this out. So Bob, I'll turn it back to you and the mayor to finish us out today.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, and I'll hand it back to the mayor in just a second. I just have a couple of wrap-up points, and one of the most important is everything that's getting put out on the chat. We didn't address all of those. It's getting preserved. This meeting's being recorded, and those notes are being recorded as well. So we'll have those, and we'll make those available to the whole group as well, also, so we don't lose any of that. I did want to highlight a couple of things that I happened to see scroll through because I think they were really important. Tamia pointed out 26 weeks. That's basically what we have left in the time frame that we have to spend all of the money that's the CARES funding with it, which will go very fast, obviously. My hope is, again, just like I hope Congress can cut some of the strings, I also hope that they will extend that timeline, but we can't count on it. But that's one, and it points directly to something I saw Jan pop up there, which is that's going to make it even more critical that we tap into the network that already exists out there of folks that are already doing a lot of this work, so that we can actually help sort of further their efforts rather than try to recreate new efforts and stuff. So that's going to be really critical as well. And then Kat mentioned something that I have seen some other communities do, which is actually put, for lack of a better term, put attorneys, accountants, financial advisors, and others on basically on retainer, so that they're there as a resource for small businesses and nonprofits that are trying to wrestle with all of this other paperwork that's going on as well. So that's another idea that I've seen floating out there and stuff also. As far as next steps, the next couple of meetings will be focused on taking what you all are doing right now and further that, and starting to generate initially kind of just a sort of free-flowing list like we've started of all of the possibilities. Then we'll start refining that down into kind of priorities, and then we'll start adding into that, okay, if those are our priorities, how much of the money that we have available is going to go toward any one of those priorities, and from that begin to build a set of recommendations as we go forward. So that's kind of the charge over the next couple of few meetings. And eventually that will work its way into kind of a written recommendation, again, that will be delivered to the council on the 20th of July. I will say also, I knew this from when the council established this group, but I'm very, very impressed with the conversation. I think the council has hit a home run in identifying all the folks that are here, because I really think it's bringing to bear all of the different kind of perspectives that we really need to make this work as we go forward. We will, as we go into the discussions into the other meetings, it will become a little bit more structured. It'll still be free flowing, but we want to make sure that we capture in each of the sectors that we've got represented in here, so that we can talk about, where do we need attention in manufacturing, where do we need attention in nonprofits, education, and so on. So it'll weave itself together as we go forward to make sure we don't leave any of those pieces out as we advance with it as well. My last charge is really to talk about the next meetings. Right now, today's was Friday, but I really want to shift us away from Friday, if for no other reason, because next Friday falls on the 3rd of July, which I have a feeling a number of people may not be available for. So right now, I have tentatively identified July 1st, July 8th, and July 15th as our next 3 dates. But I have a question for you all tied with that. The idea of doing this over kind of the lunch hour, if you will, from 11 to 1, was the hope that folks, everybody's work schedules are crazy right now anyway, but was the hopes that that would potentially work for people, because you're kind of at least grabbing hold of that lunch hour. If that doesn't work and it works better in the evenings, we just need to know that. And so if you don't need to settle that out right now, but if you all would email me after the meeting, if you have right now, let me say it this way, I'm gonna assume we will use the 11 to 1 on those days. If folks have a preference otherwise, please email me. And then if it looks like a majority would prefer to do it in the evenings, we can kind of reformat that as we will, as we go along. Otherwise, plan on the 1st, the 8th, the 15th at 11 until 1 on those days. But please, if you have concerns with that, email me. And Tiffany just pushed out my email on there so that you have it if you didn't already have it as well. So with that, Mayor, that is what we have to cover, and that would move us to the final item on the agenda, which is adjournment of the group.
Well, thank you, Bob, and let me thank everybody for the input. I agree with you. I think it's been tremendous, and it's a great start. And I apologize for my technical misgivings today, but I think I rectified the problem. I don't think it's with me. I think it's with my internet. But with that being said, the last time I did this, I went on out. I didn't come back. I asked for a motion. Nobody heard that. So I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
All right. Second?
I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor, let it be known by saying of aye.
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 All right. All opposed, nay, and it looks like ayes have it. So thank you all again for coming out, and we will look to meet again on July 1st. Thank you.